nights ago, I was visiting my parents at their home. It was just a quiet evening, dinner, some small talk, nothing unusual. But then, my mom brought something up, something strange that's been happening to her lately. She didn't go into details, just said that she'd been feeling watched. That's when the conversation took a turn into something I hadn't thought about in years. She looked at my dad and said, "Do you remember the woman in white?" He froze. Then she began retelling the story. I was about 6 years old at the time. It was evening, and we were all walking to my grandmother's house. My mom, my dad, my older sister, and me. The sun had just gone down. The air was still. The dirt path we were on cut between a line of old wheat fields. That's when we saw her, a woman, dressed entirely in white, standing motionless in the middle of the path ahead. She was holding a bowl in her hands, ceramic maybe, or porcelain, and there was something about the way she stood there that didn't feel real. We all stopped walking. None of us said a word. Then we noticed something that still makes my skin crawl when I think about it. Her feet weren't touching the ground, or if they were, we couldn't see them. Her long white dress just hung there, and she was floating, hovering maybe a foot off the ground. Without turning her head, she suddenly moved, drifting sideways into the wheat field next to the path. We watched in silence as she disappeared into the tall stalks, but we could still see the trail she left behind. Ripples and waves in the wheat, parting as if someone was physically walking through it. My dad didn't even hesitate. He handed me to my mom, told her to firm stay put, and began walking into the field after her. I remember the sound of the wheat brushing against his clothes as he pushed through it. I remember the silence. Just beyond the field was a river, not wide, but deep. There were no bridges, no stepping stones, just cold water and thick reeds. He reached the riverbank and stopped. She was gone. There was nowhere she could have gone. The trail of parted wheat stopped abruptly at the water's edge. There were no footprints, no sound, no splash, just nothing. My dad stood there for a moment before he turned back toward us. He looked pale, empty, not scared in the traditional sense, more like whatever you'd seen had taken something out of him. When he got back to us, all he said was, quietly, "Keep walking." That was it. We never talked about it again, until now. As my mom finished retelling the story, I felt something crawl up my spine. I stood up and blurted out, shocked. I thought that was a dream. I told them that for years, I had vivid memories of that woman in white, drifting across the wheat, holding that bowl, and I had always convinced myself it was just a strange dream I had as a kid. But now I realized it wasn't a dream. It had happened. My mom looked at me and said, somberly, "I never saw the world the same after that." My dad didn't speak. He just sat there, hands folded, eyes distant, and he looked just as pale as he had that night, still haunted by whatever he saw when he reached the riverbank. Have you experienced something you can't explain? A strange encounter? A night you'll never forget? Send me your story. It might be featured in an upcoming video. This happened back in late 2019, fall going into early winter. At the time, We were staying with my father-in-law for a few weeks while we waited to move into our new place. We had just barely been there a few days when it happened. The house was older, kind of built like a getaway cabin. Lots of big, open windows, floor-to-ceiling glass in the living room, large sliding windows all along the sides. It was meant to be scenic, private. It didn't feel that way at night. My husband slept in the small, spare room in the back. I was out in the open living room on an air mattress with all three of our kids, ages 10, 5, and just over 1. The kitchen, dining room, and living room were basically one big, open space with only a wide kitchen counter separating it all. The kids and I were curled up close, warm and half buried under a pile of blankets. I remember waking up that night very suddenly. The house was silent. No TV, no fans, no movement. Just that kind of stillness that makes the air feel heavier than it should. I didn't know why I was awake. I hadn't heard anything. No one had stirred. The baby was breathing softly against my arm. I lay still for a minute, trying to decide if I'd had a bad dream or just hit the wrong part of a sleep cycle. And then I heard it, a knock at the front door. Not loud, not frantic, but deliberate. I froze. The door was just on the other side of that kitchen counter, maybe 10 feet away from where we were sleeping. I didn't move. I didn't speak. I just listened. The knocking didn't stop. In fact, it came again, a little firmer this time. Still no voice, no footsteps from inside. No one else seemed to notice. My husband didn't come out from the back. His dad's door stayed shut. No one said a word. I didn't want to get up. Not just because I was surrounded by sleeping children, but because something about it felt wrong, off, like whoever was at the door didn't belong there and knew it. The knocking went on longer than anyone should knock at a stranger's house in the middle of the night. Then, eventually, it stopped. For a moment, I thought it was over. Then I heard it again, footsteps moving across the porch. The porch was still under construction at the time. There were tools, boards, and building materials piled up against the house out there. I could hear whoever it was stepping slowly, carefully, weaving their way around. And then it got worse. Tap, tap, tap. On the glass, directly behind my head, there was an entire wall of windows beside us, and whoever it was had chosen to tap right where I would have been looking if I had been facing that direction. But I wasn't. I didn't move. Didn't breathe. There was a small table with an old TV and some speakers between me and the windows, but it didn't matter. That tapping was right there, right next to my head, just the glass between us. And then, just as quietly as it started, it stopped. I heard the footsteps again, but this time they were different, heavier, hollow, like boots on sheet metal. Realizing I recognized that sound immediately. It was tin. Someone was walking across tin. Only there was a problem. The next morning I realized the only tin out there was on the roof. The crew had just finished putting it up the night before. There weren't any sheets of tin lying around. No loose metal on the ground. No way to walk on tin unless you were on top of the porch, which meant whoever had been knocking and tapping on the glass just inches from my head had climbed up onto the roof from an unfinished porch floor in the middle of the night, silently. And then they had jumped back down somehow without making a sound loud enough to wake anyone else. The kind of fear that only hits when you're true. I don't know who it was or what they wanted, but I know what I heard. I know what I felt, and I know I never want to hear that sound again. The tapping, the tin, the silence. Sometimes I still think about it, and when I do, I start to feel it again. That feeling I had that night, the weight of it pressing in around me. And just now, while typing this, an owl outside my window made the most unnatural, almost human-like scream I've ever heard before returning to its normal, eerie call. I don't believe in coincidences anymore. If you enjoy these kinds of stories, make sure to like and subscribe to the channel. New true horror stories every week. You never know when one might hit.